How's everybody doing today? We have another unplanned space, but what kicked this space off today was a ton of misinformation that's coming out. And I just left a school. I got kicked out of a space from Myron Gaines space where they were ganging up on Hater, who I just brought up to speak on here, and they were asking questions and kind of bullying him around. I said, you know what? I'm going to have a space. We're going to cut through this stuff. I'm going to get to the facts today. And Hater, I brought you up to speak, man. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. They were definitely ganging up on you. I requested to speak, and they briefly discussed if they were going to allow me to speak or not. Then they kicked me out. So they didn't want to hear the information. Now, this space, again, it is unplanned, but we are going to power through some misinformation. I'm going to talk about some things in the case that some of you might not know about. Everyone is welcome to come up here and speak. You might have to wait. What I don't want to do is bring up a ton of people on stage and it turn into chaos. I'll let one or two people come up at a time. So if you have requested, just go ahead and request and I will get to you. However, if you are new to our spaces, we respect one another, even if we have different opinions. We don't yell over each other. We treat each other with respect. Okay. We can disagree, but we respect each other. All right. And we don't yell over each other. You get all the time in the world to speak as long as you keep things on topic. We're not going to go into left field talking about Epstein's client list or any of that stuff. We want to keep everything on topic. So when you come up, um, that's what we're going to do today. Okay. So um, when you do come up, if you have something to say, just go ahead and raise your hand. Now, the first thing I want to talk about today is the misinformation that's being shared. The misinformation is the judge in the US made a ruling, or claimed that the victims in the Romanian case were lying. That's the misinformation. This information came out. Tate said this himself. Tristan has said this. Their lawyer, Joseph McBride, uh, uh, implied that that was the case, and people have been running wild with this. Okay, here's what actually happened. The case in the US has not even started yet. It is still in a very preliminary stage. They're still trying to figure out what claims are actually going to move to discovery, which that's the point where both parties can share their evidence, right? The discovery process. So they're still trying to figure out what's actually going to make it to discovery. And then after discovery, they're going to go on and the case will get started. So the judge did not say that anyone was lying. What happened was that Tates made allegations stating that this victim was lying, and the court simply acknowledged Tate's allegations. That's it. In the document, the court acknowledged, they have to acknowledge this, acknowledged that Tate's allegation was that she was lying. The Tates took that and spun that into the judge said that the girls were lying. That did not happen. That did not happen. And if you look up at the top, up in the nest, I put a couple of really important tweets up there. If you swipe around, look for the tweet from Danny Pinter. Danny Pinter is the lawyer for the single defendant that's left in the case. If you click into her thread, it's up there at the top. She breaks down what actually happened and the some of the misinformation. She has a little mini thread. So I had that up at the top. As always, we always bring receipts when we make these claims, when we make these allegations, and she actually highlights the part where the court accepts their allegations and talks about those allegations. And they use the word allegations, alleged, etc. So go in there and dig through that. Now, out of that, if you scroll over, I have a tweet up at the top that says breaking Tate news. So the claims against what started off originally as five people that the Tates were suing in the US, one of them was very quickly removed from the case. He was a US Marine. And that left them with four defendants left, two of the victims in Romania and two of the parents of one of the victims that Tates were trying to sue. Everyone got dismissed from the case except for a single victim, a single victim. And out of that, most of the claims against her have been dismissed as well. So what we have, I believe, eight of them were dismissed. Seven or eight were dismissed, and I believe two or three of them are actually going to move forward into discovery. It's three of them, and those are civil conspiracy, defamation per se, and defamation. Everything else was rejected. False imprisonment was rejected. Commercial defamation was rejected. Negligent infliction of emotional distress was rejected. Intentional infliction of emotional distress was rejected. Torturous interference with the business relationship, all of that was rejected. Moving to discovery is civil conspiracy, defamation per se, and defamation. And what's going to happen at that point is both parties are going to provide evidence. Of course, Tates are going to provide their evidence to support their claim, and the defendant, who is the single alleged victim in Romania, will present her evidence to show her story. Now, one of the claims, which is absolutely wild, is they are claiming that the defendant victim was chatting with her parents when she told them through the chat messages that the brothers were human trafficking girls. Their allegation is that she knew at that time that they were not human trafficking, and that was a false statement. However, they were actually charged with human trafficking. So out of the three, I don't see how that one's going to survive discovery, and I don't know the details uh, of the other. So I wanted to get through that first and foremost. There's a ton of disinformation. The judge did not say anything about that. He only acknowledged that the Tates alleged that she was lying. So brace for maximum bullshit about this misinformation. Now, we're going to get into a bunch of stuff today. I want to move on briefly, and Hader, I'm going to get to you here in a moment. So, Myron Gaines just held space, and it was packed full of misinformation. Myron Gaines is one of Tate's friends. He hosts the Fresh and Fit podcast. Just had a space, and they kicked me out of the space. The title was Tates Are Innocent, Girls Found Liable for Lying. Tristan Debunks Liars. Okay, the word libel has a very specific legal term, meaning that the judge made a ruling, and that did not happen. Now, Myron used to work as a law enforcement officer. He's a former DHS agent, and he knows better, but he still used the title. The girls were not found liable for anything, nothing at all. That would be like saying, because the judge actually ordered the trial in Romania, that would be like saying the judge finds Tate guilty of human trafficking simply because they approved the trial. That would be the equivalent of what just happened with his title. So just in misinformation city, the amount of BS that they're blowing up everybody's behinds is world class. Now, Hader, how you doing, man? Welcome to the space. I saw you
Oh,
ganging up on
hi.
him in there. How you doing?
Yeah, they were. I'm not too bad. Like I said, you see, the point I was making to them is that it's not a black and white case. You can't just say, oh, he's innocent and he's this and he's that. And they just weren't willing to take any opposing view. Oh,
Okay.
but why are you saying this? Why are you saying? And I said, well, the reason being, I mean, there's no smoke without fire, right? There's something that's amiss. And he did coerce people. I mean, they did. There's videos about them where they were talking about how they would convince people, especially women, into doing this type of work. I mean, it's there. It's not something that can be disputed. And they said, "Oh, but that's like from 10 years ago." Does it make it okay because it was 10 years ago? If somebody commits a crime or does something bad 10 years ago, does it make it okay that because it was 10 years ago, it doesn't matter anymore? You know. But yeah, they did gang up on me. I didn't, to be honest, I didn't really feel too bullied, but it was. I just found it really bizarre behavior.
Yeah, they don't want the real information to come out. And if you're new to the case, if you haven't been in any of our spaces before following my account, almost everyone on that side has blocked me. I'm generally not allowed to speak in the cases. So what we've done is early on, we were able to get a lot of documents out of Romania through the Freedom of Information Act. And we've been able to get a handful of the documents. Some of the documents came out unredacted accidentally. And through various contacts, we've been able to get even more documentation. So any of the stuff we talk about on our or on my account or in the spaces that we hold, I can back everything up that we say with actual documentation. Now, here's some things. Hader, and I'm going to speak directly to you because you were asking some great questions in their space that they didn't want to hear. But I'm going to say this for everyone in the space right now. There's some things that you guys probably don't know about the case. One of those things is this: there isn't a main victim. There isn't a main victim, and the case is not hinging on any single victim in this case. The brothers have put out this massive propaganda that there's a single victim or two victims, and everything is based on the lies that they allegedly told to try to frame them, to try to extort them. That is absolutely false. DCOT, which is the organization, the law enforcement organization in Romania, they handle human trafficking, drug trafficking, terrorism, etc. They identified the victims. The victims did not call DCOT for help. DCOT, after the US Embassy did get involved, there was a phone call, and this is why, partially why they are getting sued. There was a phone call from the parents of one of the victims, and we have the chat messages. The victim specifically told the parents and the Marine, do not call the embassy. Me and another girl, we are planning to escape. They were planning to escape while everyone was sleeping. We have the chat messages. The chat messages have been made public. She told them, do not call. They called the US Embassy. US Embassy contacted the Romanian authorities. They raided Tate's compound in April of 2022. At that point, they realized, DCOT realized that they might have a human trafficking situation on their hands. This is what they do for a living. In Romania, so a lot of you probably know, Romania is quite unfortunately famous for human trafficking. So DCOT realized they might have a human trafficking situation. They only then did they interview the women that they found. Only then. So the women did not call DCOT, say, help us, help us. DCOT identified the victims in April and launched an investigation. So once they found the victims in April, they simply took their statements. What's your situation here? Why are you here? What's the situation? How did you get here? Why are you working on OnlyFans, etc.? And they told them, they gave statements. Now we have a lot of these statements in the documents. They get snippets of those conversations that they put in the main indictment, nearly pretty close to 500 pages after it gets translated from Romanian to English. So we have quite a few snippets of those statements, both from witnesses and from victims. And I have some of those highlighted or in my highlights tab on my profile. So you go to my profile, go to highlights, and you're going to see all sorts of relevant things that are pinned there. So they launched the investigation in April. What he started to look for was actual evidence that corroborates the victim's statements. Because after they raided, they saw what was going on, they took the statements from the victims and they said, okay, we need to figure out if this is really human trafficking or not, because the girls say this, we see this. They launched the investigation. They found evidence that corroborated the victim's statements. When they found that evidence, they then requested a pretrial arrest warrant for the brothers, and they arrested them in December of 2022. So if you're listening to this right now and you think that they did not have evidence to arrest them in December, you were mistaken. Not only was it evidence, but it was evidence that corroborates the victim statements. And we know this because it's in the documentation that comes directly from the Bucharest court. I have it in my timeline. They had to have the evidence before they even asked for the arrest warrant. So they had evidence. DCOT is the accuser. So when I go back and I say that the case does not hinge on any one victim, it's because DCOT found, they identified the victims. Any one of these victims could be removed from the case, and it does not matter. Of course, the more information, the more evidence that DCOT has, if you have all of the victims that are stating this happened, this happened, this happened, what happened, of course, it adds more evidence to the case. But it's not required because DCOT already did a very thorough investigation and found their own evidence. So when the brothers are pushing this idea that everything is hinging on this single American victim, it's absolutely false. There are 7 victims that DCOT identified. 7. Now, those of you might be saying, well, what about the 2? And Hader, have you heard of this? The 2 who claim they are not victims? Have you heard of that?
I heard them. Yeah, I heard them mention that. Yes.
Yeah. So the 2 victims who came forward and said, we are not victims. First and foremost, victims can't just come forward and say, we don't want to be considered victims. Once the authorities have evidence that you may have been trafficked, you have to go the distance. Now, DCOT found evidence that they believe shows that they have been trafficked. Now, there are a couple things in the documents, and I'm going to read a couple of things here. One thing that they noted was after the 2 girls gave their statements, and DCOT has them noted as giving false statements. It says, in this regard, It should be noted that as regards to the defendant's ability to generate violence, it is noted that after the arrest of the defendants, the witnesses, Yasmina and Beatrice, they have their full names here, and I've got this in my timeline as well. The witnesses, Yasmina and Beatrice, were transported by the defendants, which would be the Tate brothers, to Dubai, where they are still under the control of the defendants and are used for the production of videos presenting the defendants in a favorable light, as well as for the continuation of exploitative activities. This is a statement from the prosecutor. They were tapping all of Tate's phone calls in jail. They knew everything Tate was doing. They knew that they were transporting these girls to Dubai, where they stay today, allegedly under Tate's control. There's other documentation. There's other documentation for the girls that say they're not victims that says, let me see if I can get this one pulled up here. Give me 1 second. A witness statement here states that Yasmina, and by the way, I'm only mentioning their names because they came forward themselves. Generally speaking, victims of human trafficking, their names are not supposed to be made public. You're not supposed to know the names of human trafficking victims unless they come forward, which these two did. That's the only reason I'm actually mentioning their names. And that's why the public doesn't know everyone's names. They're not supposed to know. So it says here that Yasmina, it says she is also constantly blackmailed by the defendant Nagal Georgiana that she will tell her parents what she is doing. That's in reference to Yasmina working on OnlyFans. So this is a witness statement from somebody else stating that Yasmina is constantly blackmailed by Georgiana, who's one of the accomplices that was charged with the Tate brothers. So her alone, she was blackmailing Yasmina, threatening to tell her parents that she was working on OnlyFans. It goes on to say that the witness, Yasmina Pinkov, was not allowed to leave the premises alone. It also goes on to say that she gave all of her money. Yasmina gave all of her OnlyFans money to Andrew, 100% of it. She was making nothing from OnlyFans. It goes on to say Radu Alexandria Luana sent messages to Penkov Yasmina and Beatrice Gabriella asking them to produce pornographic videos, threatening them with unpleasant consequences if they did not comply with these requests. And they have other mentions that they were verbally threatened, they were threatened with violence. And these are the two girls who are claiming they're not victims. Yasmina has a giant tattoo on an arm that says Tate owned, and Beatrice has a tattoo on her arm that says Tate girl. Essentially, this is what a lot of traffickers and pimps do to brand their property. So they were taken to Dubai. They're still under control of the defendants, allegedly, according to the prosecutor and the evidence that they have. They have evidence, they have witness testimony, and they have chat messages off of the defendants' phones themselves that detail that these girls were actually trafficked. Now, out of the 7 victims, those 2 have claimed that they are not victims. That leaves 5 left. And by the way, the Tate brothers are being prosecuted for all 7, but there's 5 left who have given statements against the brothers. So 2 said we're not trafficked. The evidence says otherwise. 5 of the victims gave statements against the brothers, and out of those 5, 4 of those victims have identified, it's a classification for victims called an injured party. So they are going to trial. They're going to trial as an injured party. They're labeled or classified as an injured party because the law states that if you've been harmed by someone in this situation, you can seek compensation. Now, this wasn't a scenario where they were seeking compensation first and foremost. After they were identified as victims, DCOT let them know that if they choose to seek compensation, they can legally do so. So 4 of them took them up on that offer. So when you see news where it says 3 victims withdrew their statements or choose not to participate, 3 of them don't want to go to trial as injured parties. That's what that means. Victim classification, you can be an injured party, you can be a victim, or you can be a witness, depending on how you're going to participate in the actual trial itself. An injured party means that you are going to trial and you're going to actively participate. Now, why can't victims just remove themselves from a human trafficking case? That's because you don't know what the situation is. You don't know if that victim is being blackmailed. Is she being threatened? Is she being paid? Are they have they kidnapped her son? I'm not saying that's the case, but because the authorities don't know the situation of why a victim might be saying that they're not victims, they have to go the distance on this. And in this particular case, because DCOT has a significant amount of evidence that shows that they are in fact victims, they are being prosecuted for all 7 victims. So some of you might not have heard that before. If you've been listening to some of our spaces, maybe some of you have. Hater, do you have any questions so far?
No, I'm actually learning a bit more depth of things which I already had an inkling and a feeling of because, like I said, I've not really been huge on this whole thing, but I do find it quite repugnant that there's people out there trying to defend them as if they're almost angelic and can do no wrong. Um, but I don't know. That's just a general feeling I got in that crowd. That was almost making out as if these people they've never done anything wrong. They're literally innocent, and that's the whole narrative that doesn't sit comfortably with me at all. I mean, so I'm sorry, but when people have made videos of how they recruit, how they coerce, how they manipulate, and then when somebody comes and makes an accusation against them, and then they say, "Oh no, we're innocent. They were consenting adults." No, you kind of already have highlighted the fact that you wanted to coerce these people, and they didn't like that. They just weren't willing to listen to any sort of opposing opinion, which I found absolutely wild.
Yeah, I heard
Right.
them. They kept trying to frame it as you just morally didn't approve, and they kept trying to say, "Well, what is morally wrong? What have they done wrong?" I heard them trying to spin this around. They wanted to take the conversation in front instead of what are they criminally liable for, or what have they criminally potentially done to you just morally opposed to this. That was a weird twist.
It was weird. I found that
So
really bizarre. I just don't understand why somebody would want to sort of defend them so passionately and fiercely when, in any case, right? Things aren't black and white. That's why they go to court in the first place. If this was a black and white, open shut case, they'd either be free or they'd be in prison. But because it isn't, that's why they're going through a legal process. I mean, that's just common sense at this stage, right? But unfortunately, that's not something that was being discussed.
yeah, uh, so I've got something you probably don't know. And for those of you listening right now, you probably don't know this if you're new to my account. So this did not start in April of 2022. Didn't start in December of 2022. This started in March of 2021. So in March, late March, early April 2021, an investigation was launched in Romania. They were looking into allegations that Tristan Tate used the lover boy method to recruit and allegedly traffic a minor into prostitution. This started in 2021. Did you know that, Ader?
No, I wasn't aware. I mean, I'd heard about it, but I
Yeah.
wasn't aware that it was that recent.
Yeah, 2021. They started an investigation into him possibly trafficking a minor into prostitution. And because it's sex work, the legal age for sex work is 18. So that would mean anyone under the age of 18 in this situation. Now, this is one of the situations where it looks like the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, but this particular investigation eventually ended up merging with what was happening that started in April 2022. So they ended up merging these investigations. And what happened was during the process, people said, well, why is this taking so long? Why did it take them from December until June of 2023 to actually charge them? Because they were actually looking at a ton of different offenses, a ton of different offenses. In fact, there's a second case that's being built right now in Romania. So you have the first case. Well, let me find this list here. Give me one second. You have the first case that they've been indicted on, and they took a handful of the, excuse me, the offenses that they were investigating at that time. They disjoined them into a new investigation, and that's going to come as a second indictment in Romania. And I'm looking for the actual list here. Give me one second. I'm going to pull that up. There's the actual charges here. Got a whole list of things here. So, okay, I can't find the list, so I'm gonna shoot it here. So they are being investigated, and this is probably going to turn into this is what's going to be the second indictment: money laundering offenses, bribery and corruption offenses, additional human trafficking, trafficking in minors, and a charge called influencing statements. Influencing statements is essentially witness tampering or obstruction of justice, depending on where you're at in the world. And they're being charged. Andrew specifically is being charged with influencing statements because while he was in jail, of course, they record all of the jail conversations. If you're in jail and you're making a phone call, unless it's to your attorney, they're recording those conversations. So they've got him on recorded jail calls, and we have some of these conversations. I've shared it in my timeline. It's pinned to my highlights tab, where he was contacting Luke, his cousin, and they were trying to intimidate and coerce two of their victims into withdrawing their statements from DCOT. So they were basically, well, not basically, they were trying to pressure two of their victims into changing their statements, withdrawing their statements. That's illegal. You can't do that. That is witness tampering and that's obstruction of justice. So they're picking up an additional charge for that called influencing statements. And for bribery and corruption offenses, also through recorded jail calls, Tate was trying to bribe two local Romanian politicians to assist and help him get out of the situation. So he got caught dead rights on recorded jail conversations, and he's picking up additional charges for it. But a lot of these actually came from the initial investigation. The DCOT had 180 days to actually indict them, or they had to cut them loose. So what they did was all the charges that were ready to go, like we're ready to go on these. That's what they indicted them with for this first indictment. All the others got disjoined, and they're coming in this second indictment. Now, we had a journalist in Romania in one of our spaces about a month ago, and he has sources inside of DCOT. He was saying that DCOT told him that they have identified dozens of victims for the second indictment. But what they don't know yet is how many of those victims are actually going to make it into that second indictment. Could be two, could be 10, could be dozens. We don't know yet. And I heard one of the arguments that a woman named Aisha was making in Myron's space today, saying, um, they've had hundreds of girls work for them. Why have they only found two or three to come forward? They didn't. They identified seven in the first indictment. And if they've already identified dozens more for the second indictment, and again, we don't know how many is going to actually make it into the indictment, but they've identified dozens more that they're trying to get into the indictment. I think it's a good indication that these guys may be involved in some nefarious stuff in regards to how they actually got the women in there. And Hader, you brought up great points. You were telling them, and they didn't want to hear it. You were talking about they publicly would talk about their coercive methods, how they would recruit girls, how they would go into these relationships with girls. These are things that they openly bragged about for years. And for those of you who don't know what human trafficking is, people love to mock this chart. If you go up to the top to the Jumbotron and you scroll all the way over, you're going to see a chart. Now, this chart is an example of what human trafficking actually is in accordance to the Palermo Protocol or the UN Protocol for Human Trafficking. 181 countries have signed this protocol, including the United States, including the UK, including Romania. They've all agreed upon, at a minimum, this is what human trafficking is. Now, for human trafficking to take place, you need three elements. You can't have two elements unless they're underage. We can talk about that in a second. But you need three elements if they're over the age of 18. Can't be one, can't be two, has to be three. So you need an action, and an action can be a recruitment, it can be transportation, it can be the transfer of a victim, the harboring of a victim, the sheltering of a victim, or receiving of a victim. So you need some sort of an action. You need a means. And by the way, you just need one. You don't need multiple. You only need one. So a means can be deception, fraud, coercion, threats, violence, abuse of power, or taking advantage of someone's vulnerability. And the purpose is always for some sort of exploitation. In this case, it's mostly for commercial sex work, but it's also for forced labor. So you have to have at least one action, one means, and one purpose. And in this case, against the Tates, they have recruitment, they have transportation, they have harboring and sheltering. For the means, they have deception, they have coercion, they have violence and abuse of power. And the purpose is for sexual exploitation or commercial sex work, which is sexual exploitation and forced labor. So that is what human trafficking is. We have this idea because we watch Hollywood movies and we see these sensational headlines. Liam Neeson making the phone call. I have a very specific skill set. He goes for his daughter who's been kidnapped and drugged. Like we have this idea of this is what human trafficking is, where people have to be put in the shipping container and sent across the ocean. And yes, that happens. Girls do get drugged, they do get kidnapped, they do get chained up to a wall. That absolutely happens. But the majority of human trafficking today, in regards to sex trafficking, revolves around the recruitment, the deception or coercion for sexual exploitation. That's the bulk of human trafficking today, and a lot of it is happening with OnlyFans and webcam. So if you're thinking that, and I see this a lot with the Tate fans, say, "Well, these girls, I saw the CCTV footage. They were walking around. Nobody was kidnapped." Right. So they don't have to be kidnapped. People do get kidnapped, but the Tate brothers were not charged with kidnapping. They were charged very specifically with human trafficking. That is because, and for those of you who have seen the videos, and Hader, you've probably seen those videos too, because you've talked about it. They talked about using Instagram to recruit girls, right? So they have
Yep.
recruitment, right? He taught people his recruitment method on courses, and it doesn't matter how old those courses are. Those courses and his videos are part of the case. They are relevant to the case because it shows his methods, it shows their MO. And I've got screenshots from the indictment where they actually list some of those videos that there's multiple pages of videos that they're using in course material. And I've taken some of those pages and I've highlighted them or I've pinned them in my highlights tabs. You can go read them yourself. Part of the case because they show his methods. It doesn't matter how long ago they were. It doesn't matter. That's how he recruited girls. And he goes on in the course material and he talks about how he would use his, and he calls him a bottom bitch. He would use his bottom bitch, which would be another woman, to help coerce the girl. They would help try to manipulate the girl into it. Sometimes they would get them drunk. They would get them drunk and get them working on webcam. You can't do that. That's illegal. Now, the Loverboy method that a lot of you have heard of, and by the way, I see hands going up, so I'm going to start bringing people up to speak here in just a moment. I have a whole list of things that you guys probably haven't heard about, but I'll start taking questions here in a moment. The Loverboy method. The Loverboy method simply means that a man, I mean, technically it could be a woman, but it's primarily a man recruiting a woman, or they already have a woman and they're trying to take advantage or exploit that woman, right? Like, hey, I have this plan, right? If you have a plan that you're going to create a scenario to try to coerce and manipulate a woman into working in pornography, that's human trafficking. If you actively recruit someone through DMs, reaching out on Instagram, like Tate would teach them, right? If your goal was this, I'm going to recruit someone, then I'm going to enter into a false relationship with this person. I'm going to make this woman think that I want to be her boyfriend. In some cases, and we've seen through the chat messages off of their own devices that are part of the evidence, some of these women went to Romania thinking they were going to marry the brothers because the brothers built this huge deceptive story that they were looking for a wife. Some of these girls didn't go there. They didn't know anything about OnlyFans. They didn't know anything about webcams. Some of them went there thinking they were going to get married or be the significant other. When they got there, didn't work out that way, right? So you have recruitment, you have the deception because they recruited them for the purpose of deceiving them so that they could commercially exploit them in the sex industry. That is check, check, check for an act, a means, and a purpose. And they transported them to Romania. They paid for their transportation. They facilitated the transportation to Romania and they sheltered them in Romania. So you have multiple acts. Once they were in Romania, they coerced them. So you have deception and coercion and violence, threats of violence. You have multiple means as well. So that's what human trafficking is. That's how it relates to this case. And I got a ton more stuff. But we got hands up. I don't want to be the only person yapping here. I apologize if I'm not going in the order that the hands came up. I'm just going by the order that I saw them. So first up, woke AF. How you doing?
Thank you. As usual, good morning, murdered gadget thoughts. Anyone else I might know in here? Something that came to mind, I just wanted to ask really quick. It's a short question, but maybe not such a simple answer. The two women that are claiming they weren't victims, can they change their minds on that? Can they come around and say, you know what? We came to this realization. We were victims. We want to change our stance on that. Is that possible?
I suppose it could be. One of the problems with human trafficking, I mentioned earlier about victims can't just say we're not victims because you don't know if they've been blackmailed, you don't know if they're being paid, you don't know if they've been threatened, you don't know if their child has been kidnapped, you don't know the situation. But another problem here that I failed to mention and I should have is that a lot of human trafficking victims, because it's done through the Loverboy method, they don't actually realize that they're victims of human trafficking. They don't realize that they've been exploited. They they look at the situation of, oh, he loves me, he's doing what's best for me, he's being hard on me or he's making me do this so we can make money and be rich together, whatever it is. It's everyone in here probably either knows someone or has heard of someone where you have a situation where, you have a wife or a girlfriend that's abused by the husband as well. He only hits me when he's drunk. He only hits me because he loves me. Right. It's that similar thing. So you have a lot of victims of human trafficking that, number one, they don't even understand the laws of human trafficking. And until I explained what it was just a few minutes ago, I bet there's a lot of people in this space right now that didn't know what human trafficking was either. So unless you know what human trafficking is, unless you realize, and keep in mind, you know, try to put yourself in their shoes. It would be a very difficult truth to face where you have to say, wow, I was trafficked. I was recruited. Everything he told me was a lie. He doesn't love me. He never loved me. He was never looking out for us. Everything he did, he found me. He recruited me. He deceived me. He coerced me. He lied to me so he could make money off of me in pornography. That's a hard pill to swallow for anyone. So, in addition to not even understanding what human trafficking is, a lot of them they don't know or they don't want to know. They don't want to accept it. That's a hard truth. So can they change their statement? I believe they can in that situation where it's like, hey, for example, let's say they give a statement and then it's later explained to them what human trafficking is, right? And or sometimes some trauma happens. Trauma has a way of rewiring your brain. Sometimes people don't realize what happens to them at the time, but they realize it later. You have a lot of sexual assault situations where women are assaulted and they don't realize that they were assaulted until later on. They're just thinking about it or whatever. Or somebody explains it to them and they're like, oh my God. Yeah, I think, wow. Yeah, he assaulted me. So I didn't realize that. So I think in that situation, they could come back and say, yeah, you know what? Now that I understand what it is, or now that I've thought this through, yeah, I think I am a victim myself. But going the other way, saying that, yeah, I'm a victim, and now I'm going to change my mind and say I'm not a victim, I think that becomes very suspicious, especially when the Tates have already been caught trying to intimidate two of their victims into changing their statement. They got caught. Let me say it again. They got caught trying to intimidate and coerce two victims into changing their statement. They're getting another charge because of it. So anytime you have a situation where if any of these girls try to backpedal and say, yeah, I originally thought I was a victim or I was exploited, but now I've changed my mind, they've already caught them trying to do this. So they're going to go the distance on that. I know that was a long answer. Uh, but I think they can. You're kind of getting into the weeds there and technicalities, but I
Yeah.
believe they could
That's
in
why I
one
said it
way.
was a short question, but not a simple
Yeah,
answer. Because we all
yeah,
know they were actually victims. You know what I mean? We all
yeah.
know that the two bottom bitches or whatever, if there was one, they were all victims. But, I hate to, they also did commit crimes. So it's a shame. But thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, and just to be very clear before we move on to the next question, just looking at, one or two of the girls who claim they're not victims, just strip away everything else. If you are being blackmailed to make pornography, you're a victim of human trafficking. You right? If you were recruited, if somebody hunted you down and found you, and they are now blackmailing you to make pornography, you are a victim of human trafficking. I do not care what you say. I don't care what anyone else says. You check every single box for human trafficking. That is not open for interpretation. If you're being blackmailed, you're being trafficked. Okay, Robert Bauer, how you doing, sir? Thanks for your patience.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, man. How you doing?
Yeah, thanks. I've been following your content for a while, and it is clear to me that these guys are fucking monsters, and more than one way are criminals. But they are not gonna come here and actually talk with you. So I would like to ask some questions I would think they would have, or
Awesome.
content this.
Yeah, awesome.
So if
Okay.
I look at this chart, like it seems to me that the means part are very wide, like deception, coercion. These can be very broad things. So does this mean that like if anyone like works in the porno industry, which is legal in many places, and just deceives someone in any way, that should be human trafficking?
Okay, great question. And I'm going to answer all your questions, but let's address them one at a time just so I can accurately answer them. So if you're looking at the Palermo Protocol chart above for human trafficking, so you have to keep in mind here that you can't say someone is being trafficked simply by looking at one of these. All three elements have to exist, right? You can't just say, well, I was deceived into doing something, or I was threatened into doing something. I mean, there could be ramifications for that alone, but it's not human trafficking. In order for it to be human trafficking, all three elements must be present if you are over the age of 18. That means there has to be at least one action, one means, and one purpose. So if someone was simply just deceived into pornography, I mean, there could be a legal situation there for something else, but it wouldn't be human trafficking unless there's an action involved.
Yeah,
And
so
right,
what I would example, it would be an easy example for this is like someone hires a foreign porn actress to work. So that is commercial sex work, and that is like transportation to a foreign country or recruitment. These are recruitment transportation. I imagine happens frequently in porn industries. So if any form of deception comes into that, that's ultimately would qualify as human trafficking.
if the other elements are met, probably right. So you got to think about it as a whole. So because a lot of foreign actresses are say let's just say they go to Los Angeles, right? So say you have someone from Prague and they're invited to come to the United States to make pornography to Los Angeles, right? So they're recruited and they're transported to Los Angeles, right? Now the purpose is for commercial sex work. So that by itself isn't necessarily the problem. What could make it a problem is the means, right? So if she is recruited and she's transported for the purpose of making porn movies, as long as a means did not happen, then that would be legal employment. But if a means is involved, if she was deceived, if they committed fraud to get her over there, if they coerced her to do it, if they threatened her to do it, if they threatened violence or they committed actual violence against her or they abused their power or took advantage of her vulnerability, then it could be human trafficking. So
So
the means is very important here.
yeah,
The right, what's the intent? Think of it this way. What is the intent of, let's just say, the porn producer, right? I'm bringing this girl over from Prague to make these porn videos, right? What is his intent? Is he recruiting her knowing that he's going to deceive her or coerce her or threaten her? If the answer is no, then it's probably legal employment. If the answer is yeah, like I'm recruiting her and then I'm going to rip her off and not pay her a lot of money, or I'm going to try to get her to do things that she doesn't want to do, like anal sex, or I'm going to maybe not pay her unless she does the type of scenes that I want to do, which might be a gangbang, or I might put her health at risk by making her do non-condom scenes without being tested for HIV and STDs, right? So if you have the intent of the producer and it falls into the means category, then yeah, you're going to have human trafficking.
mm, yeah, I think that makes sense because these are very very on the line industries, even if we consider them legal. Like it's very amoral. But yeah, people using it should be very careful not to deceive someone, not to tell them that I'm gonna pay you $1,000 if you come to the US and they only get 500. Yeah, it makes sense. But can I ask one more question? Is the is human trafficking the right word to use just because people are gonna have this misconception of human trafficking is like kidnapping people?
What do you mean?
Like you explained that people have this misconception of human trafficking is when you kidnap or steal people, drug them and put them in a container. Like that
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
what people come to mind in human trafficking. Should, I don't know, maybe should this be something called something else, another crime, instead of expanding human trafficking as a label?
I mean,
Possibly, there could be an argument for that, but there's also human smuggling, right? There's human trafficking and there's human smuggling.
Hmm.
So if you're smuggling people, say, across international borders, that would fall into the human smuggling territory. Now, here's the other thing. Not every country has a robust set of rules for human trafficking. You might have heard the term sex trafficking, and you also heard the term human trafficking, right? Some countries will make a distinction between human trafficking and sex trafficking, where like a country like Romania, it's all under the umbrella of human trafficking. And if you're wondering what the difference is, so you can human traffic someone for lots of different reasons. One of the other most popular ways of trafficking someone is for labor, right? Like look at the Middle East, right? Look at Dubai and all these places. They are, there's a lot of human trafficking going on there for labor, right? Bringing people in from India, from Thailand, from Cambodia, from Myanmar, from all these Pakistan, etc., and taking advantage of them there. So that is a labor, right? That's the exploitation there is for forced labor. But sex trafficking, all that means is it's human trafficking, but the purpose is for sexual exploitation. That's all that really means. So when you hear sex trafficking, you're like, oh, what's the difference between human trafficking and sex trafficking? It means that it's human trafficking, and the purpose is for sexual exploitation. But yeah, I mean, there could be an argument there to where maybe they could define these a little bit better. But the way I mentioned before, the UN Protocol for Human Trafficking, which is Article 3 of the UN Protocol for Human Trafficking, if anyone's interested in looking this up. So they built a framework, right? And again, 181 countries, I believe, have signed on to this, and they use the protocol at a minimum, right? So this is a very minimum, and each country is allowed to build upon this. So let me just kind of read this here. So for the purpose of this protocol, A, trafficking in person shall mean the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power or a position of vulnerability, or of the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation. So you can even be paid and still be trafficked. Keep in mind, it's the intent, right? I'm going to recruit this person, I'm going to coerce them or deceive them. And even if I pay them, I've put them into this situation and I'm basically trying to pay, I'm trying to buy their consent. So, because of that, Section B here says the consent of a victim of trafficking in persons to the intended exploitation set forth in subparagraph A, what I just read, of this article shall be irrelevant where any of the means set forth have been used. What this means is you cannot consent to be exploited. So if you were put into this situation because you were threatened, you were forced, you were coerced, you were abducted, they committed fraud, someone has abused their power over you, have taken advantage of your vulnerability, or even if you've received payments, right? So if they've gone through the acts, right, you've recruited them or transported them, sheltered, harbored, etc., and they've used one of these means, you cannot legally give consent. So when you have these arguments, and this is something they were talking about in Myron's space, which just was infuriating me. They were saying like, "Oh yeah, these girls knew what they were getting into. They were making money." Yeah, well, we have direct proof that some of these girls were not making money. Some of them were giving 100% of their money to Andrew, and you cannot consent to be exploited. That's the issue here. And now they go on to say, because you might ask, well, what is exploitation? So it says here, exploitation shall include, at a minimum, the exploitation of the prostitution or others or other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. Now, Romania goes, right? So this is at a minimum. Keep in mind, this is at a minimum. So Article 210 of the Romania Criminal Code, trafficking in persons, they're very specific on this. It says trafficking in persons in Romania is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of a person for exploitation purposes by means of coercion, abduction, deception, or abuse of power. They also go on to say by taking advantage of the inability of the person to defend him or herself, or to express his or her will, or of his or her blatant state of vulnerability, or by giving and receiving payments or other benefits in exchange for the consent of an individual having authority over such person, shall be punished by no less than 3 years, no more than 10 years imprisonment, etc. They also go on to say here, the consent of an individual who is a victim of trafficking does not represent a justifying ground. So Romania is also in alignment with the UN Protocol for Trafficking that you cannot give consent to be exploited. Now, should this be renamed? I don't know. I think the more you understand about the trafficking laws, the more you might say, yeah, it kind of makes sense, but maybe they should specify, right? Like, I like that some places will separate it human trafficking, sex trafficking. That makes a clear distinction on what happened. So when you say human trafficking, your mind goes to shipping containers versus sex trafficking. Now you're thinking pornography. Now you're thinking prostitution, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't disagree with you on that one. Keep going. I know that was a long answer.
No, yeah, that is a great answer. Yeah, I was just thinking, how do people still justify their behavior? And it's so disgusting, but also so fucking sad that like one of the guys on their uh, place was said that millions of young people would have killed themselves for not for Andrew Tate. And really, this is why you don't kill yourself, because of this bold asshole drug dealer. It's
Yeah,
so sad. It's really sad on some level. Yeah. Thanks, man.
yeah. I want to expand one more, a little bit more here before moving on. So Romania also has their definition of exploitation. Remember how I mentioned here in the UN protocol where it says exploitation shall include at a minimum, right? So all of these countries are building their trafficking laws and exploitation at a minimum, right? So they've built a wide framework on purpose. So if you see things like deception, you see things like coercion, these are broad statements because traffickers are always changing their methods. They're always changing things up. They're always trying to get around the laws, but because they have a wide net, they don't have to continually change the laws. Like here's a very wide framework for what trafficking is at a minimum. And that allows all of these countries to prosecute successfully human traffickers without having to always change their laws every time the traffickers come up with a new method. So Romania also has their own definition of exploitation, and this is where it kind of ties it in together with the brothers. Article 182 is the exploitation of purposes. Exploitation of a person means A, forcing a person to carry out work or tasks, B, enslavement or other similar procedures implying deprivation of freedom, which essentially you've been kidnapped and enslaved, which is not the case here. And C, forcing persons into prostitution, and this is where they get them, pornography, or in view of obtaining and distributing pornographic material for any other types of sexual exploitation. Because the brothers were putting these girls on webcam and OnlyFans, it falls under exploitation C for pornography. So they are very specific about how this law is used in the case, and they reference A and C. C is due to pornography and in view of obtaining and distributing pornographic material. And they also mention A, which is forcing a person to carry out a work or task. And that's based on how they were making the girls work on TikTok. The Tate brothers love to say their entire case is based on TikTok because they try to help girls go viral on TikTok. That's not the case. They use TikTok for a couple of reasons. Number one, they use it to break in new girls, right? They would get them having fun with the other girls, get them drinking, get them having a good time, and just loosen them up, right? Try to break into new girls who were not ready to be pushed into pornography yet. And number two, they would make the girls work up to 12 hours. The allegation here is they would work up to 12 hours at a time with only 5 minutes break. 12-hour shift, you get a 5-minute break, and you would get deductions, a 10% deduction for everything that you did. So if you blew your nose, if you were caught crying, if you fell asleep, if you did all these different things, they would deduct, 10%. So the girls were making some money off of TikTok, but they had to share all their TikTok money with Georgiana, Luana, and the Tate brothers. With OnlyFans, some of the girls were making some money, but they had to share that as well. But some of the girls were giving Andrew all of their money. That's where the whole lover boy stuff comes in, right? Those girls were thinking, oh, I'm going to give my man my money. He's doing this for us, etc. She's not aware that she's actually been trafficked. So they use TikTok to break in new girls, but they also used it as a traffic funnel. They would go live on TikTok. They would force the girls to go live. This is the allegation. They would force them to go live, and they would force them to make videos until they, let me back that up. They would force them to make videos until they reached a certain follower account. Once they reached a certain follower account, then they could go live. Once they would go live, they would essentially fish for customers, and they would then send those customers from TikTok to Instagram. And in Instagram, they would have a link in their profile that would direct them over to OnlyFans. So they had this trafficking funnel set up, and a lot of OnlyFans girls still do this to this day. They will do something on TikTok, they send them over to Instagram. Instagram allows them to put the bio links, then in the bio links, they direct them over to OnlyFans. So that's how they would use TikTok. The case primarily is based around allegedly trafficking women into pornography, which all but one of the victims is for OnlyFans. Take it back. One of them is for TikTok, the rest are for OnlyFans, and one of them is for webcam. The brothers have said there's no webcam involved. One of them is specifically for Andrew for webcam. So I want to get that out there. Robert, did you have any more questions? And Hader, I see you're still in here, man. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, not questions as such. I was just going to say that in a way, it's a form of slavery. I think is probably a better way of putting it, because you're exploiting someone's body for financial gain, and it sets a very dangerous precedent if this, goes unspoken of, simply for the reason that it just will mean that more and more people will be able to exploit people in this way in the future.
Yeah.
And I mean, for God's sake, I mean, it was called the Hustle, wasn't it called the Hustlers University of Hustlers or some shit?
Yeah.
I
Yes.
mean, for fuck's sake, I mean, look what they've called themselves. It
So
should
they
be screaming and blindingly obvious at that stage that this is literally a university for pimps.
according to Andrew in a video, he said that Hustlers University was to get young men making money so they could then join the war room. And we know through leaked war room chats, and by the way, for those of you thinking the war room is not part of the case, the war room chats and all the content in the war room are in volume 75 in the evidence. For those of you who have not seen the case files yet, you're going to see a huge pile of journals. We can talk about those journals here in a little bit. I kind of got sidetracked. What was I talking about before I started talking about the case files? Oh yeah, Hustlers University. Andrew said in a video that Hustlers University originally was to get young men making money so they could join the war room. And we know through numerous war room chat leaks that they had rooms in there. They had a room for webcam, they had a room for OnlyFans, they had a room called the PhD room, which is pimp and hose degree. And in these rooms, they would teach these guys how to run girls on OnlyFans, how to run girls on webcams. And for the PhD, they were teaching guys essentially how to coerce and exploit women into pornography. And they would workshop. I've seen this stuff where Andrew or Tristan would teach these guys how to do things, or they would workshop how they could get a guy to get his girlfriend or this new woman that they found to work on webcam. Like they would workshop as a team how to find vulnerabilities for these women. Like that's the darkness that we're dealing with here. We're dealing with an organization of men who have no problem exploiting women. That's what we're dealing with. So to your point, Hater, yeah, the whole thing is ridiculous. The giveaway was calling it Hustlers University. Yeah,
Well,
I
yeah,
agree.
pimps and hoes. I mean, come on, really? I mean,
Yeah,
they've literally spelt it out. It's there in black and white. The name gives everything away. Why are people even debating this at this point? That's why I found it really sort of bizarre. That I mean, I don't know. Maybe these people are involved, and that's why they feel they have to defend Tate in the way they are doing. Like maybe they've got involvement.
I
Because me
believe.
personally, that's why I wasn't that. I was kind of blasé. You must have noticed. I was kind of like, well, I'm just saying it's not black and white. And what you might say, yeah, I'm not saying every single case was, you know, this way intended or this way going, but you notice that I was relatively level-headed about it. But they were like insistent. No, they're absolutely innocent. There's not a single case that goes against them. They've never done this. And I was like, are you fucking serious? It was just like really bizarre. It was like it felt like I'd taken some sort of hallucinogenic drug and I was on a trip or something. That's what it fucking felt like. It was wild.
Yeah, and
The way that they were so harsh in defending his position and making him out to be almost angelic was quite nauseating, to be honest.
100%. And here's something you might not know. So in that space, and some of you are, and I know there's Tate fans in here listening. And by the way, everyone's welcome to come up and speak and share and ask questions. You're all equal here as long as we respect each other and keep everything on topic. We respect each other. Everyone's welcome. So what some of you might not know, everyone has seen Andrew's, of course, conversion to Islam. You've seen all of the charity work. You've seen how his entire messaging has changed, and now he's all of a sudden he's a force for good. Okay, here's what people probably don't know: that when they were raided in April of 2022, one of their accomplices, her name is Luana Radu, and I've got this on my timeline as well. Her name is Luana Radu. She is a former police officer in Romania. She started illegally accessing the police database starting in April of 2022, all the way up until December of 2022. She was keeping tabs on the investigation the entire time. They knew what the police were doing, who they were interviewing. They knew the evidence that was being collected. So here's what I tell everyone to do when this comes up: look at Andrew's messaging before April 2022. That is who Tate is. That is who Tristan is. Everything after April 2022 was damage control for the case that they knew was probably going to come, because she was keeping tabs of everything. He started changing all of his messaging after he found out the allegations that were being made against him, after he found out that DCOT was collecting evidence that they might be involved in human trafficking. That's when he started changing his tone. So if you're curious, go look this up for yourself. Andrew and Tristan pre-April 2022 versus Andrew and Tristan after April 2022. Two totally different guys. And the reason is Luana was keeping tabs of the investigation and they knew everything that was going on. They knew they were going to get arrested. They just didn't know when they were going to get arrested. They thought that they could get in and out of Romania quickly. I don't know what they came to get, but they came to get something in Romania, but then they got nabbed as soon as they came in. So some of you might not have known
They flew in to get pizza.
that. They flew in to get pizza. But while we're on the topic of the journals up top, so if you go to the top and you look at the journals, some of you have seen these before, some of you have not. There are 75 journals and their case files. Each one of these journals can hold up to 1,000 pages. Now, we know from their full indictment what is inside every one of these journals. They list what every one of them is. We don't have like they don't say all of this stuff is in here and here's all the details. They give you a summary of what's in each one of these journals. And I've listed some of that in my timeline as well. Now, out of the 75 journals, not all of them are actual evidence. Some of them are just, arrest warrants, warrants to seek, financial records, etc. But the majority of these journals are actual evidence. And we know that because it's listed in the indictment what's in each one of them. There's a significant amount of evidence against them. It's also important to note, if you're wondering why this is taking so long, number one, Romania moves slow to begin with. But number two, they had to go through a pretrial stage. It's called the preliminary chamber. And the preliminary chamber, this is where the Tates go in and they make all of their arguments and they say, we weren't treated fairly, or we weren't given access to this, or they try to make arguments to get some of the evidence removed before the case goes to trial, or they try to get the trial thrown, or they try to get the case thrown out entirely. So you see that stack of paper up there, 75 journals, roughly 75,000 pages. The preliminary judge, it's a single judge, had to review all of the evidence in the case to ensure that it was all acquired legally and in accordance with Romanian law. That means they had to make sure that none of it was fabricated. They had warrants for everything. Everything was above board, etc. Now, here's the major blow to the Tate brothers. 100 and by the way, I have this ruling. I have the ruling. I have the official judicial ruling in my timeline as well, and I think it's pinned to my highlights. 100% of all of Tate's arguments were rejected as unfounded. Every single claim they made to try to have a single piece of evidence removed from the case or try to get the case thrown out, 100% of their claims were rejected as unfounded. That is a devastating blow to these guys. Devastating blow. And then the judge ordered the trial. Now, you can imagine you're a single judge and you've got to essentially look through, I don't know, 70, 75,000 pages and then make sure you're not only reading them, you're making sure that anything that's evidence actually has a warrant or make sure that it was acquired legally, right? Like that's a process. That took a very long time. The judge ordered the trial. All of the evidence was approved for trial, rejected 100% of Tate's claims as unfounded, and then Tate appealed the decision. Tate appealed the decision, so now the order to go to trial has to be reviewed by the Court of Appeal. Two judges are now going to look at everything and either say, okay, we're going to send this back to the preliminary chamber because some things have to be fixed, or they're going to order the trial. And whatever they decide will be final. So if you're wondering why this is taking so long and what those pile of journals are up there, the majority of that is evidence that's moving to trial. And now the appeals judges have to review everything. They have to listen to Tate's claims. And this is more proof that the Tates are being treated fairly in Romania. Every time the Tates have had the opportunity to appeal the decision, I think 9 out of 10 times they appealed that decision. There's no indicator that there's been any corruption in Romania or that they have been treated unfairly. Just me, you had your hand up. So we're going to go just me, then we're going to go thoughts, then we're going to go to Natalie.
Hi, thanks for letting me talk. I'm going to maybe skip around a little bit and drag you back to the beginning. My apologies somewhat. But first, to Hader, I want to tell you when you said about slavery, you are right. It's even listed in the chat logs where Iggy specifically refers to it as FSS, which stands for female sexual slavery. So this is a part of the conditioning that's programmed into the PhD program. And I'll touch on that in just a second. But Crayon, I just want to thank you for what you said about the girls that don't realize they're victims. As much as we may want to dislike these women for standing up for the Tates and some other things, we do need to remember that they are victims and they're suffering from something they just don't know. Um, the abuse that gets used in this PhD program is a very, very methodical, narcissistic abuse. And you are correct, it rewires your brain. Um, you're trauma bonded. You literally view them as a drug. They're using intermittent reinforcement to change your thinking. And all of that comes in place after they've used the lover boy method on you. And I guess that would be a good place to mention for people who don't know. I spent over 2.5 years almost underneath a war room member of Andrew and Tristan's from September of 2019 until I didn't completely get out from underneath until October of 2022. All I did was sell the man a typewriter in my driveway, and I got massively targeted. The Loverboy method was used on me. I have the passport to prove it. Was told moving abroad, et cetera, et cetera. But to jump down to it, I ended up in the end with a man in my home for 5 months that I couldn't get rid of, living underneath threats,
Let,
abuse. I had to send my son away.
let me
Question my
interrupt you for,
receipts. People in the
let me
matrix
hop
will
in.
tell you I've got them.
Let me add some context.
Yeah,
The man that put you in this situation is a war room member and someone who was close to the Tate brothers. I wanted to add that context for those of you who are listening. Yeah, he is a war room member and
correct.
he
And
was
he
close to
admitted
the
to
Tate
me that
brothers.
he taught in the he also admitted to me at one point he was teaching in the PhD program, but I honestly didn't know what that was. I was very not on social media and very unaware of what was happening the entire time we were together. But um, Hater, just to let you know, to go back again, the reason why I gave a little bit of the backstory, they jumped on you because they have a cult mentality. And when it comes to morality, I can tell you that hearing the words relative morality is literally a trigger for me at this point because it was thrown into my face so many times. So, what they're literally doing is telling men to redefine morality, that they've been held down underneath religion, governments, not having money, et cetera, for so many years that they're redefining what is moral and what is not. And so I had many, many arguments about things that were definitely unethical, maybe not crimes, but they were certainly immoral. Um, so that's why they're ganging up on you. They just aren't capable of discounting anything that these men say. And you heard the words Tateism used, and several other key cult words that tell you that these men literally view these Tate brothers as gods. So breaking through that mentality is literally going to take probably convictions at trials before a lot of them realize what train they've jumped on.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And again, I've seen proof of what she claims. I know who the person is. Um, his name is Bradley Justice. He was close to the Tate brothers. He was a war room member. And for those of you who don't know, there are multiple people who have learned how to do OnlyFans and webcam from the Tate brothers. They've also been charged with human trafficking. Vlad Obu was one of them. He also had, I believe, 3 young men who also went down with Vlad for human trafficking in Romania. They learned how to operate their system from the Tate brothers. And for those of you who also don't know, multiple friends of the Tate brothers have been charged with human trafficking. One of them is Edie Powers, who was in Romania. He's been charged with human trafficking, having sex with a minor. He was got caught making child pornography, child prostitution, the whole list. I've got this on my timeline as well. So my question to all of you is, how many of your friends have been charged with human trafficking? Because several of them associated with the Tate brothers have been charged with human trafficking and other crimes. This is one of those situations where I would ask you, show me your friends and I'll show you the future.
I'd like to
Go
mention
ahead.
I'm only one of 3 women involved with my situation. One got a conviction, and the other one is listed in chat logs. So I'm not the only person who's had incidences with the person I'm talking about.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Natalie, how you doing? Welcome back.
Hey, I'm doing good. How is everybody?
Fantastic.
Um, I just wanted to just put this in for perspective. I know that a lot of the Tate Bros, Tater Tots, they love to reference Epstein and all his doings and all these things, but ironically, there are a lot of similar details. Now, what I'm just going to preface that what I'm going to I guess exemplify is one of the associates of Epstein that didn't necessarily get charged. There are no charges, there are no court allegations as far as what I know of. But, of course, internet sleuths who kind of looked into the associates and looked into what they owned, found out otherwise. And, you were talking about TikTok being sort of I guess, storefront for their operations in a way where they had a click funnel. They were able to, basically advertise, market, their females out to Johns and all these things. Now, in comparison to Epstein, there's a really interesting associate. Her name is Nadia Marchenko. So I just want to put this into perspective because there are some things to think about here. She actually had a front company called Avaloop that would basically advertise out to clients for in the aviation industry, and she would actually utilize work what's believed to be allegedly sex workers in their marketing, and so they would basically market out to the clients and the Johns through the front, through the facade of, you get to talk to the sales agent, and then everybody else can make their own assumptions and make an imagination, use your imagination as to what happened next. So, if more people knew about that, because of course everybody knows with the Maxwell case, not a lot of details, a lot of things seem to be shielded. Not the client list was definitely not fully made transparent to the public, but if you made little discoveries like that, oh, everybody would be all on top of something like that, right? This is something that's more, TikTok is more, it is intricately detailed in the Tate case. And it's just interesting that if something like this, like the Avaloop scheme, were to ever hit the surface for the public to know about, people would be all over it when there's something very similar going on right in front of our eyes. I just wanted to mention that, because a lot of people like to make comparisons to Epstein, rightfully so. But there are a lot of things in Epstein's case that are still not known. But there are some similar,
Hmm.
methodologies
Oh,
and schemes.
it gets worse. But wait, there's more I just put up in the nest. What is that thing, like 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon? What is that? Is it 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon? Like how many connections you have to Kevin Bacon? So you could have like the 5 degrees of Jeffrey Epstein. So one of the war room members, his name is Jacob Wall, and I just put this up in the nest. This is one of their brothers. He later left the war room, possibly forced. He was hired and paid $25,000 by Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's accomplice, to smear and to try to stall the sex trafficking investigation against her. So that's
Mhm.
one of Tate's brothers. His name is Jacob Wall. You can do your own research on him. And
Mhm.
and again, I don't want to go down the Epstein rabbit hole. I like to keep being focused, but there is a connection there. So I thought that's where Natalie was going. I was like, go to Jacob Wall, go to Jacob Wall, but you didn't. So I had to make that connection. Uh,
I just noticed how triggered they got when I actually I said, just because someone's rich and famous doesn't necessarily mean that they can't commit any form of crime.
oh yeah, they went
And they
nuts.
got triggered with that. They went nuts. And I said, well, if you're going to say that, then equally Epstein was very wealthy.
R. Kelly. R.
Famous.
Kelly. R.
Yeah.
Kelly is a world famous.
Another
Yeah.
one.
P. Diddy. P.
Yep.
Diddy's going to go down. Like P.
Oh, yeah.
Diddy doesn't need to traffic anyone. R. Kelly didn't need to traffic anyone, but they did. People wrestle with demons. And one of the things they were saying when you brought that up, they kept saying, and one of the guys, I forget his name, starts with a J. He kept saying, like, make it make sense that these handsome multimillionaires would have to traffic these women to be with them. No, you moron. How do you think they made their millions of dollars? They both
In the first
yeah,
place,
they
correct.
both admitted on
Yep.
video that they made their first millions of dollars through webcamming. That's how they made their money. And we also know, and some of you probably don't know this, we know through chat conversations and through information in their indictment that they were still involved in pornography in 2022. The International Consortium of Journalists, some of you might know that name because they're the ones who exposed the Panama Papers. They've broken all kinds of big stories, and they get documentation. And I've got this in my timeline as well. They got documentation from a company called Paxum. Paxum is a online payment service that deals primarily with adult entertainment. Tristan was still receiving, and by the way, they do everything together, so this is not a situation where it's like one or the other, but it just happened to be in his name. Tristan was still receiving payments from a webcam company called My Free Cams only 4 months before their December arrest. Still getting webcam specifics from My Free Cam was being deposited into his account 4 months before he was arrested in December 2022. We also know through their own advertising that days, just days before they were arrested in December, they were still advertising girls for OnlyFans. So these guys were still involved in pornography until they were arrested and forced out of pornography. So when people say, well, these guys are handsome and why did they have to? Because of greed. It was never enough. Why do people get caught breaking the law? Why do robbers keep robbing? Because people who are greedy always want more. They want to make that extra 100. They want to make that extra million. It was easy for them. They had a system set up and greed was driving them. This was their main moneymaker. And now let's talk about assets first.
Absolutely
Yeah,
correct.
let's talk about assets for a second. Okay, a significant well, all of the Romanian assets were confiscated legally by Romania. And here's why. Because their investigation showed that everything was purchased through money that was acquired through the business that they were charged for human trafficking. They were given an opportunity to prove that some of those assets may have come from legal sources of income, and they could not do it. DCOT says through their investigation, they could not find any legal sources of income for the brothers. Now, To be fair, this could be the way they just set their structures up, put things in other people's names. For example, they were making some money from the real world or Hustlers University, the War Room, but they didn't have it in their name. Therefore, they couldn't claim that it was theirs. Now, some of you might know that they're being charged. Well, there was already a trial that just happened in the UK. It was a civil case for tax evasion. For tax evasion, the ruling on that will be held in September. They're also the new charge coming in the next indictment is for money laundering in Romania. So there was a situation where these guys were putting stuff in other people's names and they were transferring money around. And when given the opportunity to actually show that, hey, we're getting this legal money for these assets, they couldn't do it. He's talking about the Loverboy method. I'm just going to quick recap on that. The Loverboy method. No one redefined human trafficking laws for the Tate brothers, as they're saying. Nothing, nothing has been redefined. Romania has had a problem about the Loverboy method for a decade, I believe, as Pax has said. He's sent me some documentation on this. So they're teaching kids in school about the Loverboy method, women about how to be, these young girls, how to be careful because it's such a problem in Romania. And he's talking about no contracts. We know that they didn't have contracts because it's in their documentation. Let me read some of this. So I'm just going to read part of this here. It says the defendant Tristan Tate is a natural person. There's no account holder or authorized representative. No safety deposit box. No records were found. Income, according to the data provided by the Ilfov County Administration of Public Finances, no records were found in tax records with income. So he wasn't paying taxes as a person there. And then real estate, they did have real estate under company names. Then movable goods, which would be their cars and such, they had some of that. But then it goes on to say here, no employee with employment contracts. That's why we know they had no contracts with the girls. Now, no official contracts. Now, there are witness statements, but there's and Yasmina, one of the victims who said she's not a victim that's being blackmailed, she had to sign a document. She signed it. Beatrice did not. She had to sign a document with Georgiana that stated that if she didn't earn 10,000 euros per month on TikTok, 10,000 euros per month on TikTok, that she would forfeit all the money. She forfeits all the money to them if she couldn't earn 10,000 euro per month on TikTok. So they had that kind of exploitative contract, but they didn't actually have real employment contracts because they didn't have real businesses set up. So when you hear these guys in these spaces talking about, well, they had contracts and everything was legal and these girls were making millions. No, 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 no. In fact, some of the girls weren't making any money at all, other than a little bit of money that they have on TikTok. And you can go to my timeline and you can search for TikTok and you're going to find some images because they talk about this stuff. Again, every time you saw the Tate brothers and the two defendants being taken handcuffed out of a van into a garage, they were going there to unlock their devices for DCOT to extract the data from those devices, their phones or tablets or computers, etc. So they had to unlock all these devices. They did it with their lawyer present, etc. They got all of these chat messages. They're all verified, all legit. It's all part of the case files where they're talking about doing all of this stuff. They're talking about sending money, how they're exploiting these girls, how they're not giving girls passwords, how they're kicking girls out. Kristen actually has an additional charge because he told Georgiana and Luana to physically assault one of the victims, and Georgiana took him up on it. And Georgiana now has an additional charge for assaulting the victim. And the way she did it, and they're very specifically say in the chats that they were smart, that she was smart not to leave bruises on her. But what she did, the girl had fresh breast augmentation surgery. She grabbed her arm and lifted her arm up above her head to try to rip open the surgery, try to rip the stitches on her breast augmentation. I've got that in my timeline too. Go to my highlights tab, look at these snippets. So when you have these scenarios where people are like, oh, there's no evidence, there is a overwhelming evidence that these girls were recruited, transported, deceived, coerced, threatened with violence. Some of them actually got physically abused for the purpose of sexual exploitation. This girl wanted to quit. And this is probably something that you guys didn't know. The girl specifically that Tristan and Georgiana picked up an additional charge for, she went to the police in October of 2021 for help. She was thrown out of the house. She wanted to quit. She was thrown out of the house, half naked, goes to the police for help because Luana Radu is a former police officer. The policeman said, we don't believe you. Luana would never do that. She would never be involved in that. and they would not. They basically talked her out of not filing a complaint. This happened in October of 2021. While she was gone, Georgiana allegedly illegally accessed her laptop and took pornography that was made for OnlyFans and distributed the pornography of this victim on her personal WhatsApp account and her personal Facebook account to her friends and family. And she did it in front of the other girls with the statement that the next one is going to get it worse. This is the same girl that she threw around the room and ripped her stitches open. So if you're thinking that there's not a lot of bad shit
And
going
is this
on here, it's dark. It's really dark. I looked this up. So Luana says, and again, these are verified chats off of their devices. She says it's good we were there because Georgiana wanted to kill her. She wanted to kill her. I kept telling her, and they put this in quotes, beat her without leaving a mark. This is what Luana told Georgiana. It's beat her without leaving a mark, please. And Georgiana says, without leaving a mark or traces, don't worry. And then that's when she threw her around the room and they tried to rip open her stitches from the breast augmentation. So they had these chat conversations. This is why I so confidently speak about this stuff. And people come at me, the fans come at me, and as haters saw, they won't let me into spaces. Suleiman won't let me into spaces. Myron won't. None of these people will let me into spaces. I can back up every single thing I've said today in space with actual documentation that comes directly from the Bucharest court. 100% of everything I've said, I can back up with documentation. If you want to call me on it, call me on it. I will back it up, make a fool out of you. Because I've been doing this since they've been arrested. And I ain't slowing down anytime soon. Robert, you had your hand up, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, just I know these guys are like fanatics. With Myron is like total lost. He does all kinds of insane shit. But there are some more reasonable people who still defend Tate, like the PTS guy, or what's that guy? The Iranian dude.
Patrick, Bet David, and Malcolm probably just had a connection. I see Malcolm in here. Patrick Bet David.
Yeah, Patrick. Like, is that the Iranian guy?
Yes.
Yeah, and
PBD. Yep.
he has a co-host. That guy is insane, but he has a more liberal co-host who sometimes talks with the other people like more sanely. Like, have you tried reaching out to him?
We Patrick Bet David and his entire entourage of Value Entertainment, they're pushing propaganda for Tate. PBD, he's on board with Tate. Adam Sozanik I'm surprised Adam hasn't gotten pregnant with how much he rides Tate, to be honest with you. He says the most ridiculous things about Tate. And they had a new guy who was their head researcher, just gave an interview with Joseph McBride, a Tate's U.S. lawyer, and just let him, during the interview, just blow a ridiculous amount of misinformation up his backside. So I don't think there's anyone at Value Entertainment that's interested in the actual truth. For whatever reason, they're either grifting off of Tate's name or they've got some business with him that hasn't been disclosed publicly yet. I'm hoping when they get charged with money laundering, when this next indictment comes, I think we're going to get a deeper look into Tate's finances. We might see a bunch of names that we may or may not recognize. So we might see who's actually involved with some of his businesses. And so it could get really interesting. We'll find out. But yeah, PBD and company, they're on board. They're Team Tate all the way. Candace Owen, Team Tate. Tucker Carlson, Team Tate. It's wild. It's absolutely wild.
The Patrick guy is wild, but Adam seems sometimes reasonable to information, and they sometimes gang up on it as the token liberal.
I know at one time Adam was suspicious, but ever since they went to Romania, Adam he's a diehard Tate fan at this point. He started off not being that way, but he's on board Team Tate now.
Wonder what how they received him. Shit.
Well, there's a clip again on my feed where Adam was talking about when they went to visit him in Romania, and he's like, "Oh, the hospitality was great." And then he says this. He goes, "And the women," and then the other guy interrupts him. He's like, "Forget about it. Forget about the women." And Adam goes, "Oh yeah, treat them with respect." So why would you mention the women when you're talking about Tate's hospitality? Did they offer them prostitutes? Did they provide
What
women for
the
them?
fuck?
That's weird, man. It's a weird
That's
comment.
very weird.
Yeah. Why would you mention, as a journalist or somebody with a YouTube channel or someone, a professional, why would you mention the women when you're talking about Tate's hospitality. I've got the video clip in my timeline. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it does if you frame it through what it looks like, because we have other clips too where Tate talks about during War Room. There's a War Room event that was recorded, and Tate's telling the War Room members that they have women. Oh, I've got some girls in the back. I don't know where they're from. Have fun. So they've previously provided women for War Room members, and there's lots of allegations of guys to Romania with them providing women as well. You know, suspicious for Adam to say, yeah, and the women. But I don't like to speculate too much, but it is suspicious. If anybody wants to come up and speak, raise your hand. Come on up. We don't bite. I don't care if you're a Tate fan. I don't care if you hate me. You're all welcome here. We just respect each other. Try to keep things on topic as much as possible. Gadget, go ahead, man. Hey, Miniature, I see you
Hi.
down there. Hope you're doing well.
Hey, Crayons. Hey, everyone. I just thought I'd let everyone know, if you haven't noticed, I was listening into when Crayons attempted to have a nice conversation with Myron and his buddies, and listen to that whole thing go down with them just cowering and kicking him out. So I made a little clip of it up in the nest. I don't know. This guy is the alpha male, masculine male man, and it's just a little conversation he's terrified of, quite clearly. So I do find it amusing. It's been a kind of amusing end to a frustrating 24 hours. But yeah, if anyone wants to have a listen and laugh at him, that's up in the nest.
We
And then,
appreciate it, Sharon. Let's go to Tony. Let's go to Tony, okay?
all
We
right.
appreciate you, Sharon.
Catch you
Costa,
later.
real
Bye.
quick. We got murdered by Crayons, who's trying to come up. He's an anti-Tate account. It's up to you guys if you want to deal with it. I checked out his page, and I also got warned about him. He's gone out of his way to try to smear the Tates. It's up to you guys if you want to hear some dissent.
Nah, because then you're platforming someone like him, you know?
You got it.
Can we not lose brain cells today, please? It's been a great space so far.
All
trying
right.
to
defend
Yeah, I'll try my
40-year-old.
hardest to
What's
keep
up,
my
Tony?
brain cells intact there.
Thank you. Yeah, that was wild. I was requesting to speak, and then they had a brief discussion on whether or not they were going to let me speak. And they said, "Oh, we don't want to lose any brain cells today." Yeah, they didn't want to hear. They didn't want to hear what's actually going on. Because, like I said, I will back all of this up with documentation. They're pushing this huge false narrative that all of this is just revolving around one or two victims, and those victims, they're claiming that a judge said that they were lying, and that's simply not the case. I actually want to read something. I should have done this early on. I need to go back a little bit. I want to read something from. This is a official statement that came out from the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. So an important statement from the National Center on Sexual Exploitation addressing the Tate brothers' most recent lies. Okay, here it is. July 22, 2024. The National Center on Sexual Exploitation Law Center issued the following statement to correct misinformation regarding the civil lawsuit brought by Andrew and Tristan Tate against their alleged victims. Earlier this month, a Florida court dismissed 3 of the 4 individuals sued by Andrew and Tristan Tate in a Florida civil lawsuit. This lawsuit was brought by the Tate brothers against 2 young women identified as victims and witnesses in the Romanian human trafficking criminal case. A victim's parents and a United States Marine who reported their crimes to the U.S. Embassy in Romania. The Tates are currently being prosecuted for human trafficking and sexual offenses committed against several victims, including the defendants sued in Florida. Previously, a federal court in Florida dismissed the Tates' claims against a U.S. Marine, but for procedural reasons returned the case back to state court. After a hearing via several orders issued in July 2024, the Florida court dismissed all claims against one of the victim defendants and against the parents of one of the victim defendants. As to the remaining victim defendant, the court dismissed 4 out of the 8 claims brought against her. No discovery has occurred. The case is still in the most preliminary stage. The court's orders allow the plaintiffs to amend their complaint and try to cure its deficiencies, which also provides the defendants the opportunity to file new motions to dismiss. Furthermore, at this preliminary stage, the court does not make any factual findings and, under the rules, must assume all the facts as stated in the complaints are true for the purpose of ruling on a motion to dismiss. In Florida, the rules for pleading are quite liberal, and the Tates have attempted to use these liberal pleading rules to unfair advantage. Given the liberal pleading rules in Florida, it is a very high hurdle for defendants to overcome to get a case dismissed at this early stage. Therefore, it is a huge victory for the victims/survivors that the majority of the Tate brothers' claims were dismissed for failure to state any legal claim. And 3 of the defendants had their claims dismissed entirely because their complaint was deficient on its face. For the remaining claims, the defendants are confident that the truth will prevail as the remaining UK criminal proceedings continue to be prosecuted against the Tate brothers. Then it goes on to talk about who their legal counsel is. So Danny Pinter is a legal representation for the remaining victim, and she's the senior legal counsel for the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. She goes on to say, we are very pleased the court has tossed out the majority of this frivolous lawsuit and wisely narrowed the issues and claims. If the case proceeds, we look forward to the opportunity to prove the truth of what occurred in Romania, and we are confident that ultimately we will succeed and this harassing lawsuit will fail. So that's an official statement to come out. For those of you who joined us late, the Tate brothers have been falsely claiming that a judge determined that the girls lied. That did not happen. There are no girls. There is a single victim defendant left, and all the court did was acknowledge that the Tate brothers were claiming that she lied. That's it. And it's procedural. So they're pushing this massive misinformation campaign to try to make people believe that they're being falsely accused in Romania. But if you've been around since the beginning of this space, DCOT is the accuser. This victim could disappear off the face of the earth today, and I hope that doesn't happen, but technically speaking, she could, and it would have no impact whatsoever on the case in Romania. And we've also been told that the US case will have no impact on the Romanian case, whatever the findings are. So however this turns out, it's not going to impact the Romanian case. It's a civil case in the US, it is a criminal case in Romania, and DCOT is the one who gathered all of the evidence. So I wanted to put that out there.
I thought I might just quickly touch on, you mentioned, I don't know, this new valuetainment clown that was talking to Joseph McBride, Tate's lawyer.
Their
In a
lead
moment,
researcher. Their lead
yes.
researcher.
Apparently, I was like, who the hell is this guy? Just talking to Joseph McBride with the horrible camera angle with a valuetainment logo behind him with like 200 X followers. I'm like, who is this? And apparently, in his bio, he's a lead researcher and future president of the United States. So watch out for, I can't remember his name, whatever his name was. But in a moment, I'll put up in the nest, actually, if anyone's interested. I made a clip of a particular part of what McBride was talking about, the UK civil case. And this is one thing, hearing this stuff come from Suleiman and all these other peanuts, but hearing it come from a lawyer is just particularly embarrassing, I thought. So he repeated a bit of disinformation that has been pretty one of their go-to lines as far as the UK civil case. So this involves 4 women who were seeking a civil case against Tate for rapes and assaults and the various other crimes. And these alleged crimes, happened between 2012 and 2015. And they went to the police. 3 of the 4 women that were involved in the initial investigation went to the police. The investigation was just terribly botched. It took until 2019 until the CPS got the file and decided whether to prosecute or not, by which time the Tates had fled, I would say, to Romania. And the CPS decided not to prosecute, which now these are the women that a lot of you might have seen the Vice documentary that had the voice notes from Andrew Tate and the text messages saying, "I loved raping you." This is one of the victims provided that evidence, which is involved in the case. There's an eyewitness to one of the rapes, and despite a lot of this evidence, they just declined to even prosecute. So now what McBride was saying, and what I've heard Tate say, Suleiman Ahmed say, this story that I've only heard come from them, is that two of these girls in 2012 or whenever they say it was. The police took their phones. They found text messages of the girls planning to lie and extort the Tates for money, and the case was immediately thrown out. That is their story. And I'm sure there's people in this space that have seen that story and maybe even thought that's what's happened. That is not what. There's no evidence of that being what happened at all. It contradicts obviously what the women and their lawyers say, but it also contradicts what the Hertfordshire police that did this investigation, even though they messed up the investigation. They don't say that's what happened. They have actually told the lawyers, McHugh, Jury and Partners, that they believe there's enough evidence for a prosecution, and they disagree with the CPS, whereas McBride was saying that the police saw these text messages, knew they were lying, and threw the case out. So that's not true. That's not true at all. There's no evidence of this happening. The civil case is going ahead. There's a link up in the nest to a crowd fund to help the women bring this case, this civil case, and with the hope that the lawyers are pushing for an inquiry into why the CPS declined to prosecute and are looking to get that criminal case reopened as well, which is the priority ahead of the civil case that is going ahead. So if anyone can make a donation, please do. But please know that if you see Tate or any of his goons say that this is a old case that was brought up that was thrown out in 2012 or 10 years ago because the police caught two girls lying, this is a lie. And I've asked Mr. McBride and Suleiman to clarify where or what they're basing this view on. I actually tried to ask Suleiman in a space, and he said that I'm a Zionist Islamophobe and kicked me out of the space. So that's it. And the link up in the nest, if anyone can please share on all your social medias. If you can donate, great. Even a $5 or $1 donation will add up, and two, put you on an email list to get case updates as well. Joseph McBride, if you're listening to this, you're an absolute clown. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, yeah, well said. And I want to expand on this a little bit for those of you who don't understand the full scope of what's happening with the Tate brothers in various cases. So they have one criminal case in Romania currently. That's the one that they were indicted for in June of 2023. The trial was ordered. Now that's gone to the Court of Appeal, because Tate appealed that decision. That is for forming an organized criminal group and human trafficking. Andrew has an additional charge for rape, and Tristan has an additional charge for incitement of violence because he ordered Georgiana and Luana to physically assault one of the alleged victims. Now, forming an organized criminal group, this doesn't get not enough people are talking about this. In the EU, it means that three or more people have essentially conspired or put together some method to commit crimes. So there's four of them, and the allegation is they put together a system where the brothers would recruit and deceive the alleged victims. Then they would transport them back to Romania, and then Luana and Georgiana would take care of it from there with the assistance of the brothers, and they would all work together to try to coerce the girls into working on TikTok and working on OnlyFans. So they put together this system of exploitation. And this is significant because when you have forming an organized criminal group, essentially organized crime, we'll call it, when you have that on top of human trafficking, that adds weight to the human trafficking charge, because it's no longer a scenario where it's like, oh, we didn't know we were human trafficking. We didn't know that we were breaking the law. What it means is they systematically recruited and deceived and coerced and transported these alleged victims for the purpose of exploitation. They put a system together to exploit these women. That's the allegation. So this adds a lot of weight to the human trafficking charge. And by the way, I've put this all up in the top. If you go to the nest and go all the way over, you're going to see a rainbow colored graphic. And then the top of it, it's going to say McHugh Jury and Partners. They put out a statement. They're the legal representation of the four victims in the UK who were suing Andrew Tate for rape. That's what Gadget was just talking about. And they did a breakdown of all the current cases. So I just told you about the Romanian case that's happening now. In addition to that, there is a second Romanian case that's being built right now. It is also a criminal case. They're looking into additional human trafficking, trafficking in minors, money laundering offenses, bribery and corruption offenses, and influencing statements. This is still in the investigation stage. There is no rush whatsoever to charge them because they've already been indicted for one charge. They're not leaving Romania. This case is being built right now. This is supposed to be a much larger case than the first one. They also have they have a criminal case in the UK for human trafficking and for rape. This is for both brothers, Andrew and Tristan. There's a number of alleged victims in that. Now, the brothers are going to be extradited to the UK for this case whenever Romania concludes the criminal proceedings. That means that if the brothers are acquitted on all charges, which it would take a miracle, it would take a miracle for that to happen. But even if the brothers are acquitted on all charges, they will be immediately arrested and extradited to the UK where they get started on that case. Okay. And it is not a civil case, as they like to tell people, and it is not for an old case that was closed. These are separate victims. You have the 4 victims that are suing Andrew for rape, and then you have additional victims that involve additional rape and human trafficking allegations. That's a done deal. Romania agreed to the extradition. So if they're acquitted on all charges, they're arrested and they're extradited to the UK, or if they're sentenced to prison, as soon as their prison sentence ends, they are arrested again and they're extradited to the UK. So that's a big deal. So you've got the UK criminal case and you've got the UK civil case, and that's what Gadget was talking about, where 4 victims are accusing Andrew of raping them. So that's what you have right now. These guys are in a lot of trouble. These guys are in a lot of trouble, and as if you heard early on, their trouble has been following them around for a long time. So when you have this argument of, well, they're only being prosecuted because they're an influence or because Andrew's fighting the Matrix or because they're rich and famous. No, this stuff has been following them around for a long time. And now that they've got them, it's all coming home. It's all coming together. Really good chance evidence is being shared amongst countries. Of course, I have to speculate on that because I haven't seen the document, but the tax evasion case in the UK, that's an additional civil case. That trial already took place. There will be a decision in September on that. They are alleging that Tate did not pay taxes, or the brothers did not pay taxes on, I want to say it's 21 million pounds. And they are seeking payment in back taxes for, I think, 2.8 million pounds. And they have 7 bank accounts that are frozen because of that. And they claim, the UK claims, that the brothers are not paying taxes in any country. So if that's the case, then I would not be surprised if the USA comes for their pound of flesh. Wouldn't be surprised if the money laundering offenses in Romania ends up having some tax implications. And I wouldn't be surprised if the UK eventually comes in with criminal charges for tax evasion. It's easier to collect money for a civil case, a lot easier. So if they can prove that the brothers evaded taxes, they can collect the money, they could technically come after them with a criminal case for tax evasion in the UK. But we'll have to wait and see. I don't want to speculate too much on that. So yeah, these guys are in a lot of trouble. Whole lot of trouble in multiple countries. Yeah, they're in a world of hurt. They're in a world of hurt, and I have a suspicion that this is just getting started. I'm waiting for the US to step up. We'll have to see what happens there. Now, I see a lot of Tate fans in here, people who've been coming at me, people who are leaving comments right now, still trying to come at me. Come up and speak. You guys are all welcome to come up. We don't bite. We can disagree respectfully. But I can assure you that the information that you've been getting from Tate's entire PR team has steered you in the wrong direction. That's why you don't believe what is happening. And I'm welcome to explain anything to anyone who comes up and asks a question. Yeah, what's funny is, and those of you in the regular spaces know this, the fans come at me all day long. They come at me. They send me DMs. They're leaving comments on my YouTube channel. They're just coming at me, and then I give them the opportunity to actually come up and talk about this stuff. And almost always they never come up. And they They never come up, and then they come at me for not showing my face when they won't even come in and have a conversation. So that's who we're dealing with. So I'm going to do a recap here on what's actually happening for those of you who come in. The Tate brothers have been pushing misinformation, and this originated from a press release that had misinformation in it. They've done this before. They're stating that the judge in the US ruled that the girls were lying about what they said in Romania. That did not happen. That did not happen. There are no girls. There is a single defendant victim in the US case left. Everyone else has been dismissed. All the court did was acknowledge that Tate is accusing her of lying. Tate is accusing her of lying. And that was put in the document as procedural. A couple of the claims, most of the claims were rejected. A few of them are moving on to discovery. This is a very preliminary stage of the entire case. The case hasn't started yet. There was no decision. The case was not won. They're still in a very preliminary stage of this case. They're trying to figure out what claims are actually going to be the final claims to go to court on. It's a very, very preliminary stage. Most of the claims were dismissed already. Three of them, I believe, three of them remain for defamation and for what was the other one? I have it up top, conspiracy or something like that. I have the entire list up top. I got to scroll over to get to it. Civil conspiracy, defamation per se, and defamation. Those are the ones that are currently moving into discovery. Discovery is where they're actually going to share evidence from both sides. Tate's going to provide his evidence to try to prove their claims, and the defendant's going to provide her evidence to prove her stance as well. So it should be interesting. But the judge did not say anyone lied. They only acknowledged Tate's accusations that she lied. That's it. And of course, they spun that. They're actually having an emergency meeting, I think today or tonight, whenever time it is in Romania. And they're talking about the big case update. So they're going to push a ton of misinformation during this live stream. And I hope it backfires on them, because the U.S. is a little bit different than Romania. So what they say might end up being used against them. I hope it is. Just me, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I just have a question about the Florida lawsuit since we're having such a problem with McBride having a mouth as big as the ocean, it seems. When they get into the discovery part of this, will he be allowed to compromise private information and things and details surrounding that case
It's just me.
online as he's been
Is
doing?
busy at the moment. I would like to add quickly something. It's
What?
not the first
Pax?
time when they are bluntly lying about the.
Yeah, Pax, you cut her off. She was actually speaking. I think you're having some internet problems. So,
Oh, sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry.
that's okay. Just wait a second, Pax, and then I'll let you know. I think you might have a delay. Just me. Go ahead and continue.
No, that was it. I was just curious. I mean, what kind of limitations will be put on McBride about divulging information and circumstances in this case as he's obtaining this discovery on behalf of the Tates? Will they be able to enact some sort of a gag order, or will he just be out here creating a free for all for everything that they come across during this discovery?
I honestly don't know. For those of you who don't know, Joseph McBride is one of the U.S. lawyers, and when they filed this lawsuit, he purposefully, and he posted it over and over and over and over again in his X timeline. He posted the unredacted lawsuit and 100% doxed the victims. He put their real names out there, their identification numbers, their phone numbers, their addresses, their passport numbers. He completely doxed the victims in their entirety. He had to come back and delete those. I think he foolishly left one of them up. And I hope that bites him in the ass later. So to answer your question, I don't know how this is going to play out, but I also I don't expect him to follow the rules. As they get more information through discovery, I fully expect him to break whatever rules are put in place, and I expect him to dox her again and put all that information out for the public. He doesn't play by the rules. He's a dirty lawyer. To be blunt, he's an absolute piece of shit lawyer. He goes live in podcasts with like a cross hanging behind him or a picture of Jesus and talks about being someone for truth and justice and all of this stuff. And he just bold-faced lies and makes up things as he goes. He is an absolute piece of shit as a human being. And I hope he's recording this, and I hope you sue me. I would love to see you in court, dude, because I would not roll over. I'm not someone who's going to roll over on you. I just brought another speaker up. The nickname is, or the name is Damned. How you doing, Damnation? What's on your mind?
I didn't even realize I pressed request. I'm sorry about that. I was just intensely listening to the conversation because I'm quite curious about all this because, you know, it's not good, is it, for Andrew Tate? And I can't stand men like that, like in the slightest. So it's an interesting conversation. Thank you. And you're certainly supplying information which I'm assuming Mr. Tate doesn't value. But I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to do that. But at least you know I'm not spying on you.
Well, you're more than welcome to stay up here. If you have any questions or anything, now would be the time. You sound great.
Has,
Good microphone.
has he? I'm assuming that at some point he has tried intimidating his witnesses. The witnesses, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. While he was in jail, they caught him on recorded jail phone calls trying to intimidate two of the victims into changing their statements with DCOT. They've got his recorded phone calls. It's leading to another charge. That charge is called influencing statements. That's essentially witness tampering or obstruction of justice, depending on where you're at in the world. But there, it's called influencing statements, and they've got him on recorded calls, and they've transcribed those calls, part of those calls in the indictment. And another thing that's really interesting, if you're a fan, you probably remember when he got arrested, all of these women were making videos for him. All these videos. Well, he's such a nice, they're so nice. I know them for so long. They would never do anything, etc. So, and I've got this in my timeline as well, and it's pinned in the highlights tab. All of that was an orchestrated PR move that they recorded also during his jail conversations. They told which girls to make videos, and they even told them what to say. So all those videos where the girls were talking about, oh, they're so great, they would never do anything, they would never hurt anybody, and that was a coordinated PR move. I've got it pinned in my highlights tab. It's part of the indictment. It's part of the case, and we've seen some of those transcripts from the recorded jail calls, all orchestrated.
Thank you for that. What actually got you so curious about this case, you personally?
My youngest son. My youngest son, during the pandemic, kind of got sucked into some of the negative aspects of what Tate was promoting at that time. If you remember, everybody's stuck inside, and it was difficult to open up social media sometimes without seeing some video of Tate. And at that time, they were paying students in their Hustlers University. They had like an affiliate system set up where they would pay their students to promote them on social media. It was a well orchestrated algorithm coup, so to speak, in terms of how they took over platforms like TikTok very rapidly. They had all these students just uploading these videos nonstop, and the goal was is to try to drive them to their online school where they would get paid a commission. So it was really smart how they put it together, but unfortunately, the content that they were being given at that time was a different Andrew Tate. He was lots of messaging about misogyny and how women were stupid, etc. And my son got caught up in some of that. And what algorithms do is they try to predict, and then they serve you. They try to predict what you're going to watch next, and then they will serve you more of what you interact with. So if you're watching videos on YouTube or TikTok or whatever platform, and they see, okay, well, this person engages with this type of content, they're going to keep giving you more of that. Even if you react in a negative way, even if you're leaving comments that are negative, the algorithm doesn't necessarily care that you are giving a negative comment. They just see that you're engaging. So they're like, okay, well, this person likes to watch this type of content for whatever reason, so let's give them more of it. Unfortunately, my youngest son got caught up in some of the more negative content, and that all came out one time over dinner. We were sitting at the table, and I forget how the conversation went, but my youngest son said he's not listening to women anymore, talking about my wife, his mother, because women were stupid. And you can imagine how that played out at the dinner table. And that just kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of not only trying to figure out who Andrew Tate was, but trying to figure out what was going on social media that could influence my son in that way. And, as a parent, I was really hands off. The pandemic was weird. That was just a weird time. I don't think anybody was prepared you know, for all of that, especially if you have kids. Like normally, maybe we would have kept a better eye on what they were consuming, but at that time, everybody was just trying to get through that period the best we could. And boy, he got sucked into that stuff. So it's yeah, one thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and my account, as luck would have it, I met up with a group of people, and some people knew how to get documents out of Romania, and some people were Romanian, like Pax Wax down there. We have translators and people who know how the justice system works. And I don't know, it's just like a hodgepodge of people came together to get information out there. And as luck would have it, my account ended up being one that was getting a lot of attention. And here I am. It wasn't really planned. It just sort of happened. So, and it was a long answer, but it was
Oh, no,
not
no,
planned.
no.
Yeah.
Thanks for the answer. I was just curious, and I'm sure that he played on a lot of people's insecurities, whether it was women or men at the time, and hence why he was so successful.
Yeah. He's good at what he does. He's good at what he does. And to young men who might be trying to figure out their place in the world and they don't know yet how things work, they don't have experience yet, or maybe they have a little bit of experience and they're failing with women, or maybe they're failing with trying to make friends, or they're out of shape, or maybe they're bullied, whatever the reason is. There's a million reasons why someone might gravitate towards someone like Andrew Tate, but he knows how to appeal to certain types of people for various reasons. My son was one of them. Um, Kind of had to deprogram him a little bit, and getting access to these court documents where he can see chat messages that have come directly off of their devices, so he can see how he really is in real life. That was a real eye opener for him. You have him, the social media influencer, and they love to say, well, he's just playing a character. But when you see the chat conversations and you see how they are in real life, you realize they're not playing characters. This is how they really are. That was a real eye opener for him and his friends, the whole group.
His friends were caught up in it as well, were they?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This has been quite an experience. We don't give all the information to his friends, but we've given copies of a lot of the documents to their parents for them to go into some of the more in-depth conversations that I don't feel comfortable having with people who are not my children. Conversations about sexual assault and rape, etc. I feel like that's a conversation that the parents need to have with their child, not for me to have with someone else's child. So yeah, so they have access. They've been given all the documents that I have, and I've kind of explained what these documents mean and what these different segments are, and what I've used to try to communicate to my son. What means what, and yeah, it's been a learning experience for all of us, and the whole group of them have woken up. I guess they've escaped the matrix. I believe Andrew Tate is the Matrix. He, I believe a he created a boogeyman to sell people the solution. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I can relate to that. At the end of the day, when someone's feeling pretty down and out on themselves, they're looking for someone to look up to.
Yeah, and it's attractive, right? He's got Bugattis and McLarens and Lamborghinis and Porsches, and he's got this compound and these beautiful women and the boats and the yachts, like private jets. Like I can see how that can be appealing to certain people. I really understand how that can be appealing to people, especially young men who are trying to figure out their place in the world, or maybe prove their place in the world. You know, I get it. I get it to a degree. Where I draw the line is, it's one thing to aspire to be better, and I support that fully. Start a business, go to the gym, take personal responsibility, whatever. I support that. But when it comes to women are stupid, women shouldn't vote, women are for exploiting, that sort of thing. I've got to draw a hard line on that.
I
And I had to,
appreciate that you do.
yeah, and I had to explain that to my son as well. You know, why? Here's where you draw the line, and this is why you draw the line. Right? We've had some really interesting conversations, and I've struggled quite a bit trying to articulate and make a young man understand, you know, why these things are bad. Um, yeah, it's been an experience, and I had no desire to learn anything about the Romanian legal system or all of that, but it just happened. I don't know. I think part of, you know, based on my previous businesses, and I've just read so many legal documents over the years, and I've worked in, you know, international business and stuff like that. I have a knack for this sort of thing, for being able to read documents and understanding them and stuff like that relatively quick. So I think my past businesses has allowed me to quickly adapt and understand what's happening, so I can speak about it in this manner. And you know, I speak to lawyers as well. You know, I DM with a Romanian lawyer on a fairly regular basis, and he's anything I don't understand, he will explain it to me the best he can. And yeah, it's I'm appreciative of the entire group of people who have come together from all walks of life, from different parts in the world, different religious beliefs, different political beliefs, and we just leave that shit behind. You know, we don't argue politics, we don't argue religion. We focus on the mission, which is get this information, figure out what this information means, and get it out there for the world to come, so they can come to their own conclusions. Um, yeah,
I think
rambled on a
I
bit
will
there.
say this: it's a positive thing for young ladies and young men that you highlight this problem, so they don't fall into a trap of it, and they can learn from it in that aspect. So, kudos.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a team effort. You know, it's a team effort, and I kudos to everyone involved in getting this information out there and trying to understand it. And listen, if you're a parent listening to this live or during the replay, if you have a daughter and she is dating someone, I urge you to find out if that male that she's dating is a fan of the Tate brothers, and if so, to what degree are they a fan, and what sort of messaging from the Tates resonates with them. It's very important, so your daughter doesn't end up in a situation. And if you have sons, young teenage sons, it's important that you also find out if your sons are being influenced by the Tate brothers, and if so, in which way? Which way are they being influenced? Okay, I need to wrap this up. We've been going for a while. I want to thank everybody for sharing this out. Thank everybody for coming up and asking questions and sharing. I appreciate all of you. This will be available for the replay, so you can share this. I go over some of the basics during the beginning of this about the misinformation that's being shared. The judge did not determine that the girls were lying. That didn't happen. So thank you all. Well, we'll see you in another space. I don't know when that's going to be. I didn't plan on having this one, but there was so much misinformation coming out. I felt that it had to be addressed, um, and be open to take questions about it. And surprisingly, not many fans, or actually no fans came up to ask any questions. So kudos, everyone. Have an awesome rest of your week.